So as Dave Grohl would say,
As Dave Grohl
and
say.
it's appropriate to where I'm going to go with this.
Yes.
I've got another confession to make.
Yes.
So
Uh-oh.
a while ago in the car, the last preset, we used to have 103.3 or 103.5, 103.3 out of New York, The Edge. And I don't know if it's gone off the air, if it's just whatever. Anyway, so I set a couple of weeks back, about a month back now, I set the preset to Q107.
Well, on purpose.
On purpose, yes.
Okay.
And I said to Kel the other day, I'm actually really enjoying having Q107 as one of the presets, because when I do a lot of driving, right? Like I spend a lot of time in the car driving back and forth to Quarry Creek, Grimsby, or wherever.
Yeah.
Up to the cottage. So I said to Kel, I'm really enjoying having that as a preset. And she said, yeah, that's because Q107's caught up to you. And I'm like,
okay.
Interesting. I said, I don't know if it's necessarily, or that I've caught up with it, but yeah. And so what I found was really interesting. I was talking to somebody about this later.
Yeah.
Afterwards, was it's interesting how, because I did say to her, I mean, some of the music I play on Q, I'm still not a big fan of, right?
Okay.
But it's like, if I think about now to 30 years ago, Nirvana's Nevermind, 30 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Nirvana's Nevermind is still relevant today. I mean, it's not for me earth-shattering like it was in 91, but I mean, it's still relevant to not just me, but to many people. It's played on everything, right?
Yeah.
On stage. Go back, if I was to look at then, when I was in, growing up in the 80s, if I was to look back 30 years before that, the music from the 50s wasn't relevant to my age, right? In my teen years.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to think of, and this is where I was talking about even with my kids, not talking with my kids, but talking to this person about my kids, we've had 50 years, and I know before, when we were talking classical and music, wasn't necessarily evolving like it does today. We've had 50 years of almost shared music experience that's as relevant today as it was 30, 40, and even up to 50 years ago. Yeah. So, and you have, the accessibility. We've talked about this so many times on the podcast about, streaming services, right? Yeah. And the ability for kids to discover music that they wouldn't have necessarily discovered. I mean, I guess we would have picked up, our parents' album to put them on, but again, it wasn't really as relevant to us, in our teen years as it is to kids that are potentially, in their 20s or teens today. And you also had, we also had things like the Wii and Rock Band, right? Where kids discovered 80s music through playing Rock Band on their Wii devices or whatever device they happen to play it on, right? So it's really interesting that, you have from teens all the way up to our age, and we have this shared experience of music. Again, there's different genres and people like different, different types of music as it spins off in different directions. But generally speaking, when it comes to rock and roll, and other genres, you could say the same for hip hop and others, there is that shared experience. I don't know how many times I can use the word shared experience in a pre-show, but there is that is very different from us to our parents' age. So that was my profound pre-show.
Yeah, no,
probably not very profound, but
I totally understand. I'm looking for the name of these Marvel movies because the music from these movies is the music that I would listen to. So Guardians of the Galaxy. Just amazing music on all three of their movies.
Yeah.
And whenever something will come on, I'll tell Casimir, oh, that's so-and-so, and a couple of years ago, I think after the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I noticed on one of his playlists were songs that came from that movie. So yeah, kids are discovering our music, or our kids are discovering the music that we grew up with in different areas.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was fascinating. And again, so that a lot of that came out of the fact that, I put on Q107 now. And again, there's music that I'm not a big fan of.
Sure.
But they play a lot of stuff, and I wouldn't necessarily go to Apple Music and throw on Boston, although I might, but because it's a classic album or ELO. But there's stuff that they're playing from back then that I love that I wouldn't necessarily immediately go to listen to. So driving along, get sick of a song on a different station, click, hey, cool, I haven't heard this in a long time, and grooving out to my childhood.
Yeah, no, I totally get it, and similar to that, 97.3 Boom plays music that I would hear on CFTR 680, and that was a top 40 station.
But I'm talking about good music,
and that's the pre-show. Oh, Greg.
Before we end the pre-show, I see something behind you that I don't think we can.
Tina Turner passed away last week. We're recording this on the 29th. And when she passed away, we have a cousins chat, and a lot of our cousins live in England. And I was shocked at how many, here I am thinking Tina Turner, just me, American. And so many people in England were like, oh my God, she was the best, Queen of Rock. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know she was huge there. Little did I realize she was bigger there than she ever was here. And she was a citizen of Switzerland. Lived in Germany, lived in England. I want to say France, but I might be wrong there. But yeah, just great music. And listen, I don't know how much justice I can do, so I will direct everybody to one of the music podcasts that we talk often on this show, is the Rolling Stone podcast. Go take a listen to that, and their Tina Turner episode that came out last week. Just phenomenal. What a voice. Just amazing. But one of the interesting things that I discovered about this particular album, Private Dancer, the song Private Dancer, do you know who wrote it? You'll never guess. Like, zero guesses.
I feel like I've known this, but I can't think of it offhand.
Mark Knopfler.
I think I knew that.
Yeah, and every time I listen to it now, I think, okay, how would Mark sing it with his very distinctive voice as well? But apparently people like the Rolling Stones and David Bowie really helped Tina Turner out when she was trying to create for herself a solo career at the age of 44 years old. She was huge as part of Ike and Tina Turner. Many people know the story. If not, go check out her biography. I don't know what channel it's on or what streaming service it's on, but go check that out. But she got away from that and just became huge. She passed away. I think she was in her 80s or 90s? I can't recall. But she had lived a good life. Someone at the office last week says, I'm so sad I'm not going to be able to hear her. I guess, listen, you'll be able to hear her music from now until the end. Like, just her music is out there, and just great music. So even though over the years, a lot of our musical heroes and people that whose music we enjoy will pass away, the music still lives, and we can always enjoy listening to some great tunes. That was the great Tina Turner.
Lol Cream was the producer of the video of Simply the Best.
Okay.
Wow.
The one with the horse.
Yes, yes.
Lol produced that on his own.
Okay.
Does he know who Lol is? Do you know who Lol is? Godly Cream.
Oh yeah. I wanted to talk about
Greg knows everyone
later, but yeah, no, I mean I did not realize that.
No, I didn't either until we looked it up.
Oh really?
Yeah, because I never knew that Lol. I knew Lol did some adverts on his own, but I didn't know he actually did videos of stars on his own. But apparently he did.
Okay.
Anyhow, I've listened to some of your shows. You talk very quickly, so I'll try and be as quick as I can.
We'll slow. Oh my goodness. Are you sure you didn't listen to it on like
double
1.2 or 1.5?
No, I was of all the interviewers I've heard, I thought, oh bloody hell, this lot are going really 100 miles an hour, and I like to slow it down so I don't have to think what I'm going to say.
Well, listen, Harvey, we're gonna slow it down for you.
Okay, cool.
We're gonna slow it down. It might be, Greg. It might be you and I live in a big city, and Harvey's coming from, from England.
Are you in England or are you in California right now?
Where are you?
I'm in Rancho Mirage, which is about 10 miles from Palm Springs, California.
You're chilling out there in the West Coast.
I was hardly chilling. It's in the 90s, anyhow.
Nice. There's no need for you to rush anymore. You're just relaxing now, enjoying life.
Yeah, I don't even have a tie on, but neither do you.
Hi, the following podcast is brought to you by Radical Road Brewery, the best craft beer in the heart of Leslieville. Find them at 1177 Queen Street East. That's Radical Road Brewery.
Hi, this is Harvey Lisberg, author of a book called I'm Into Something Good. And I'm speaking to a program called Welcome to the Music.
Welcome, Harvey. It's an honor and a privilege to have you on our show. I'm super excited to ask you a whole bunch of questions, but the first one that I'd like to start with, you, as I understand, you started your career as an accountant. You've been involved in football, or soccer, as we say over here in North America. You've been involved in snooker and I believe other sports. How, or maybe the question would be, why would you get involved in the music business?
Basically, because I'm musical. Okay. My father was a first violinist at Manchester Grammar School, and then in the army, was in an army band. And I learned to play the piano when I was about 8, and then the guitar when I was about 15. And so I really enjoyed music. And then our house was inundated with music, opera till it was coming out of my ears. And I didn't like classical music at the time, but I grew to like it. And I like all music. I just love it.
Nice. When you first came on, you noticed the Tina Turner album Over My Shoulder.
I noticed the legs.
Jesse, I'm telling you. Let's see the other side of the...
Oh, my God. Yeah, okay.
I didn't want to say anything, but I heard a Beyonce quote. I think Tina Turner was getting an award in America somewhere, and Beyonce was performing and speaking to her, and she talked about her energy, her enthusiasm, her voice, her courage, and those beautiful legs. I wanted to ask you, Harvey. Tina Turner famously left America, found a home for herself and for her music in Europe. And I wanted to ask you, your thoughts on Tina Turner, her legacy, why you feel Europe embraced her well before America did.
Well, it's a very hard question to answer that, because obviously she had the original hit with Ike and Tina Turner, massive hits in England. And I think English fans, they liked black girl groups, actually. They were very popular in England. She had a terrific vitality. I mean, she just had the movement. Her movements were fantastic. I mean, even whatever age she was, she surpassed anybody else. She was just very magical. And she had wonderful records. They were great songs. You know, without the songs, she wouldn't have been anything. They were great. I mean, Simply the Best, just a classic number. Nut Push, City Limits. I mean, all these were massive hits in England. So I see no reason. I don't know why the Americans might have gone off her, but England was always pro Tina Turner. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about it on the pre-show about Private Dancer, and that Mark Knopfler had wrote it, and it on the pre-show we talked about, it reminds me a lot of your story and you know what we've learned through, you know, the book and research. And that, I mean, you seem to have a knack for finding songwriters and hits. Like I think of the Sedaka story that you shared. You know, what do you think about it? And I know you mentioned that you just love music. Is it just love of music, or is there something more to it in your ability to find those gems?
I lived in an era when there were so many of them around. When we went to the office in the 60s, we were getting demos that were every day. It was either Goffin King or William, or it was the Fortunes, or Wider Shade of Pale, or every minute you were hearing these, you know, the records, the A-label records. We used to get them in, and there were so many hits. So Without You, Nielsen, just millions of wonderful, wonderful songs. I don't think you get that today so much. I was discussing it with my son earlier, and we were saying that the celebrity is so important now. In the 60s, the song was so important. Whatever you had, you wanted a break, you needed that hit song virtually. I'm not talking about the people with massive followings or the grassroots that followed the Pink Floyds and everything else, but initially in the 60s, it was hit after hit, and everybody followed the charts. So my ability to find songs, I don't think it was just songs. I had a knack of being able to see what was going to happen for some reason down the line. And I'd have been rejected and kicked into touch way before anything happened. My first footballer was in 1960. Yeah. I went to Manchester United. I had another footballer who was an England under-21 forward, Gary Owen, and he wanted to move to Manchester United. And I phoned up Manchester United, and they said, "We don't speak to managers. We're not talking to you." I thought, that's nice. You've got 75,000 people paying whatever you're paying. You're screwing the footballers, and you won't speak to me. Well, fortunately for them, or unfortunately, the tables have reversed.
Yeah,
it's interesting you say that too, because you talk about they wouldn't talk to managers. You said you'd have all this music coming to you. You know, whether it's released or I'm sure, you know, tapes and not tapes, but, you know, people teaching you music. Was it a question that I have as a former musician in the 80s and 90s? Was it different then than it was sort of when I was a musician, and for sure now, in terms of like, you can't submit a demo without representation, right?
You can't get arrested today. It's a different world today entirely. Yeah. I mean, artists were looking for singles. They weren't writing them themselves. Musicians, you know, the writers had a great time, really, because they could send one to Tom Jones, one to Man from Man, one to the Yardbirds to hear that. Now, I know today, who are they going to send it to? They'll send it to Beyonce. It'll be rejected before it gets through the door. There's no way. I mean, all they want to know now is, has it got 1 million streams? And then the brilliant record company, with its infinite wisdom, will take a risk.
Yeah.
After it's popular, yeah. So the story goes, you hear the Beatles, and you figure, I can do that. Or not that you could write the song, but, you know, I can be the brains or the business.
The Beatles revolutionized my life. I was an accountant, as I say. I was peddling songs that I wrote that were probably mediocre. And That's being complimentary. And I couldn't get arrested, so I decided to get my own group. Then the Beatles happened, and everything changed because the Beatles revolutionized the English music scene. We no longer had to listen to crooners with American accents, boring us to tears with Moon in June. We now had an English band with humor, with brains and originality. And it caught on like a house on fire. And it just snowballed from there, from them to the Rolling Stones and so on and so forth. And there was just a massive wall of sound. And then we had all the fashion change, and all the young people didn't have to wait for solicitors or attorneys, as you call them, to die before they got a job. You know, young people took over the whole place. And it was just lucky to have lived in that time. And that's what I want to get over by the book. It's not just music, it's not football, it's a feeling of euphoria at that time. You couldn't believe it unless you lived through it.
Yeah. Do you you and your son talked about it's not the music anymore, it's the image.
Machinery.
Do you talk about the time, even like that energy and the youth? Do you talk about that there'll never be I don't know if you would call it, if you want to call it the British invasion or not, but there'll never be a time where music is just everything?
I'm not sure with artificial intelligence what the hell's going to happen. Because that's the next thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be inundated with voices from all past or wherever it is, and they're all going to be put to you. And you're going to see shows where the images are all going to be created, not the real people. It's going to be a whole kaleidoscope that's going to go on in front of you. And actually, the Beatles kind of started it with that show Love in Las Vegas. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah. No,
but that was that sort of going that direction. I think that's where the future of music is. And promoters today are promoting shows, naming it the Elvis show. Yeah, okay, it's Elvis's image modified, it's Elvis's music, but it isn't Elvis, but there it is. And the public are, and maybe that's because with music, good music lasts, and then the music becomes important. Sort of Gilbert and Sullivan is played like 150 years after it's been done. Beethoven, Mozart, so maybe if it's good enough, the Beatles' music will definitely be heard in 100 years' time.
Yeah.
Whether the music of today will, I'm not as convinced. I don't know.
It's funny because, again, on the pre-show we were talking about rock music specifically, and again we talked about hip hop and that, but we were talking about that with rock music. My kids who are in their late 20s, really good rock music has carried on through the years. I mean, Nirvana's Nevermind is not as relevant, but is relevant today like it was 33 years ago. And so there's this body of music that's happened over the last 50 years that's shared among generations now that we didn't necessarily have before. I don't know. Yeah,
that's true. I agree with that.
Yeah. When you talk about songwriting, you hired or you brought on board Graham Goldman as a songwriter.
Well, I actually always liked Graham Goldman. Okay. He lived near me, and he was in a band called the Whirlwinds, which were very popular. Kind of an Irish Jewish show band that played bar mitzvahs and weddings and played all the current hits of the day. And they revolutionized their kind of music, because the band leaders before would be playing waltzes and foxtrots and God knows what. It was a young band. And I always liked Graham. He's very, very, very good guitarist. They had an awful manager who was as arrogant as Manchester United were to me. And that might be because he thought I was Alan Klein, but I don't know. I wasn't in the music business. I was just an accountant. I couldn't have been much of a threat. So anyhow, once Herman's Hermits started, they got some success. I approached Graham. I said, look, why didn't your band come with me? I'll try and do what I can do. He did do. And then I said, well, why don't you pack in your job? He was selling shirts in some retail outlets. And I said, I'll put you on a wage, which is about £5 a week, which wasn't great, to keep the wolves at bay. But as I say to people today, there were no mortgages, no children, no 3 Ferraris in the garage. So he didn't need that much anyhow. So and he was very happy with living at home with his parents. His father was a phenomenal playwright, amateur, with little success, but very talented, and helped him with the lyrics and did a lot of the early lyrics were for his father. So it was an interesting team, father and son.
Wow.
That's fascinating.
And classics like For Your Love by the Yardbirds.
Yeah, well, exactly. For Your Love the lyric would not be written by a 17-year-old boy. It was written by a 45-year-old playwright who was a bit of a genius. I'd give the moon if it were mine to give. I'd give the stars and the sun for mine to live, to thrill you with delight, something every night. There'll be days that we'd excite, make you think of me at night for your love. Well, that is not the lyric of a 15-year-old boy. I'm sorry.
No.
Wow.
Can you share the story about like the road that song took to actually
I
make
was
it?
managing Graham, and House of the Rising Sun was a colossal hit, which we loved. Everybody that played the guitar played those 4 chords. And I said to Graham, hey, why don't you write a song on those chords? And Graham surreptitiously changed the last chord, minimally. And he started doing that part of the song. And then in the middle, I suggested, I was very integral in that song. Why don't you change the beat in the middle? Let's try something else. And we did. And then you got in the middle, like the rock part, and then we got the whole song. And I was like, right, it's a number 1. I mean, what do I know? It's a number 1. I don't care who does it. Let's take it to the Beatles. Then we know it's going to be a number 1. And Graham looked at me as I was bloody mad. And, well, I was. To be in my business, I had to, once you go in the music business, you have to be a little bit crazy. So anyhow, I decided to go and see the Beatles. I went with Graham, and we had a demo of the record, and I was going to get it to them at the interval. The opening act was the Yardbirds, and then the Beatles came on, and you didn't hear anything. All you heard was girls screaming. It was like, deafening screams of 16-year-old girls. You didn't hear any music, really. And before the interval, I looked around behind me. There was a publisher published our material called Ronnie Beck, and I said, look, I want to get this song to the Beatles. And the usual smile. And he comes back after the interval. He says, do you mind if I play it to the Yardbirds? I said, no effing way. This is for the Beatles. It's number 1. And anyhow, he did get it to the Yardbirds. And Giorgio Gomulski, who was a real pioneer of rock music, the guy that managed the Stones, originally had the Crawdaddy Club. And the Yardbirds, the Rolling Stones were the house band and the Crawdaddy, whatever it was called, that club. And subsequently, the Yardbirds became the house band. And he got it to the Yardbirds, and they did it. Eric Clapton blew his fuse. He couldn't stand it. He wanted to be a blues band and not a rocker and not a pop band. He left the band. So that song has got a very coloured start, to say the least. But I still think the Beatles would have had a number 1 with it.
So, Harvey, let me ask you this: like today, if that happened today, you would be credited as a songwriter on that. Graham's father would be credited as a songwriter on that.
Graham's father, no, Graham's father was intentional. Well, in both cases, the names were kept off because I was managing the act, and I didn't think it was right for me to take any credit for it, even though musically I might have been involved. I was trying to promote Graham as a songwriter. I wasn't interested in me as a songwriter. I was always in the background. That's why I'm doing all these interviews every day and night, because nobody knows me from Adam. I was not Robert Stigwood that was going around doing outlandish things or doing whatever Peter Grant did or whatever anybody else did, or Colonel, all these people that were really right in I was like the puppeteer from the background. So it was a different story. I don't know if that answered that question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is your, like, do you, I'll forget. I don't want to think, regrets or anything. I wanted to ask you this.
I've got lots of regrets, but
is there a band? Is there a band, or is there a song that got away, or a band that got away?
Well, Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber got away. That's a small couple.
Wait, they got away? Wait, I thought you got them. So
I gave them a management development contract and didn't go into the management contract. So when I say they got away, that was a regret. So I let them get away. It was a regret that I didn't publish Joseph and the Dreamcoat 30 years before it happened. You know, it was a regret. Wow. But, you know, I was very green at the time. You know, I was probably 24, I knew nothing about anything. And I was waiting for the Alan Kleins to tear me to pieces. Managed to resist.
Wow. So how does that story begin? Like, were you friends with Tim or Andrew?
Tim and Andrew sent me said, can I come and see you? I said, yeah, sure, come up. They were two young kids, long hair, kind of hippie, student types, university 20-year-old type of thing, very well spoken, very nice. We've got this song, I Fancy You, or something like that. I want to get it to Herman's Hermits. Would you do it? It's sure. I sent it to Mickey Mouse, who rejected it. It subsequently was a #1 for Jason Donovan from the show. I know you're smiling. It happens all the time, you know. You just take it with a pinch of salt. Anyway, after that, I said, "Have you got anything else?" I said, "Oh yeah, we've got an album. We've just done a show at a church hall called Joseph and the Dreamcoat." And I started salivating. I thought, yes, that's a great idea. The evangelicals in America, they're gonna burn this up. We'll do it. Got the album, sent it to 16 different record companies, got through to the heads of all the companies, because I didn't need to go through the secretary's fourth boyfriend to get it heard. They answered the phone, they saw me. Every one of them turned it down. 10cc, who weren't 10cc then, but all the members of 10cc, and everybody else that I was involved with, what are you messing around with that? What are you messing around with that? So this kind of answers an earlier question of yours. What? Something inside me said, there's something there. Anyhow, so I said, look, come on a management development contract with me. And we gave them £5 each a week again, you know, keep the wolves at bay.
Yeah.
And then after 2 years, nothing had happened. Everything was wrong. They said, well, we've got another right. And the contract was just ready for kind of renewal. Obviously, they would have got more money. And they said, we're doing this thing called Jesus Christ Superstar. And I thought, oh, no. I'm a Jewish boy from North Manchester. And I don't think the community in 1967 or whenever it was, okay, you'd have to rub it in. I've seen that, believe it or not, I've seen that before. So anyhow, we're just going to do this, and we're doing a concept album. And so it was a bit like, I pass. Okay, well, that was the end of that. So that's a kind of regret.
Wow.
The other regret.
Go ahead.
One other regret, which isn't musical, was Graham and I were going to purchase a series of 24 Hockney paintings, which were 48 by 30 inches, called the Blue Guitar Series, for £24,000, which presume would be worth about 30 million today or something like that, and probably hanging in some harem somewhere.
Oh my goodness!
In the Middle East.
That's crazy. You brought up Mickey Most. I want to sort of explore, you know, your relationship with Mickey and what was that like over the years, if you don't mind sharing.
It was a good relationship. I mean, I accepted the fact he rejected all the wonderful material I sent him, like For Your Love, like Bus Stop, which I thought would have been perfect for Herman's Hermits, like many other things, until finally he came round. But I admired his ability he in particular, to find a hit, and from different genres. He went from House of the Rising Sun, the Nashville Teens, then we did Dandy, which was the Kinks, Donovan, you know, Jeff Beck. I mean, he picked songs, and then going back to Sam Cooke, Wonderful World, the Silhouettes from the Rays, you know, he had the ears. Apparently, and I didn't know this, but Keith Hotwood from Herman's Hermits told me only recently that he was massive in South Africa before he came to England, a massive star. So he probably knew all these 60s songs, and they're probably 50s songs, and they're probably infiltrated. As a person, he was an egomaniac. That was okay. I could handle it, because Klein was a bigger egomaniac. I mean, there's limits. There's some are in the stratosphere, and then the others are just about on Earth. He had a very healthy ego. Had the biggest house in England, probably £20 million it was at the time, and he had a Rolls Royce, and he had a yacht in Cannes. So he lived the high life, but he had a nice side. I mean, in the studio, he had a long conversation with my wife, Carol. He said, "You've got to stop smoking." And it was like really, really like a fatherly figure telling him, "You must really," I mean, it's nothing to do with music or anything, but he had that side to him that was very nice. And it was a kind of weird. And the other side was the real hard. The other thing that I regret about Mickey was he didn't allow the musical development of Herman's Hermits. They were very good musicians. They could play, and they weren't allowed to write songs. They weren't encouraged to play songs. If they did songs, they were never even considered. It was a shame, because I think if they'd have been helped along, they might have come up with something really useful. And they did write some nice songs, but nothing ever reached anywhere.
Oh, interesting. I wanted to ask you about that. We Greg and I interviewed. There's a massive music station that was in Canada back in the, Greg, what was it, 90s, called Much Music, similar to what Americans think of as MTV,
right?
And there, we spoke with the director of this documentary about this time in history that people of Greg and my age, it was very influential in terms of the music we listened to, just amazing, and just the people and the stars and the bands that came through that channel. And I was curious as I was reading about Herman's Hermits. They did movies. The Beatles did movies. Why? I'm not sure whether song videos was a thing back then. Maybe it was. Maybe the movies were the vehicle for the songs. Why was that such an important aspect for bands at that period of time?
Money.
Simple as that.
Well, it's an easy answer, but
yeah.
And everything was controlled by the record companies. Obviously, they invested the money in the films. Hard Day's Night.
Okay.
It wasn't a great movie. They didn't use the top of the top, which they could have done. Sinatra had the brains. He went in From Here to Eternity and got the Oscar. Because he did a real part. Presley was a puppet, always, with beautiful girls and a chick movie. Why? Why not put him in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or really give him a part that would mean something? So all the music things they were like I don't know, they were like, what's it like? What do you call it? The pop bands that had no kind of meaning or depth. They were kind of shallow, and those were the films that were churned out by people. But I must tell you the story. I mean, I was, we had an office over a Chinese restaurant. It stank of Chinese food. And the aroma came through. And I went in on a Monday morning. My office was about 12 feet square. And in the corridor, there's two people standing there. One with a seersucker suit on type of thing, and the other a fat, bald-headed guy with a huge cigar. Apparently he made Elvis Presley movies. And he says, "We've come to ask you whether you'd be interested in Herman's Hermits coming to America to do a film." I said, "Well, it's impossible. We've got the date sheets completely full. We only need them for 2 days." I said, "No, it's really not." He says, "We'll give you $45,000 for 2 days. We'll fly you in first class. We'll give you anything you want." And I'm thinking, God, what does this guy think of? As I went into the office with all these demos everywhere, everywhere smoke stained, a real horrible office. It wasn't like a Sunset Boulevard overlooking the sea. So anyhow, I said, "No, I can't do it." He said, "Well, look, we'll give you anything you want. Tell us what you want." So like an idiot, I said, "All right, we'll have a Cadillac." "You got it." Right? So that was it. We got $45,000. Cadillac, which we split between every member of the band, drove it for 4 months, and then it ended up with me. This Cadillac was just about fitted in the drive, but an inch on either side. And that was, and this Sam Katzman, he did Elvis movies, he did Elvis Presley films. And there you go, Where the Boys Meet the Girls. And it was one with Connie Francis, I think, and then we did ours. And incidentally, in that time, we had to provide music. So I said, "Well, Graham's got a song. Can we use that?" And they did Listen People, which got to number 2 in America.
Huh.
Nothing to do with Nicky.
Just a plug there. Just a plug.
A negative plug, but it didn't matter. It all helped. I mean, Herman's Hermits was such a phenomenon at the time.
Yeah.
We outsold the Beatles one month. How do you do that? Mrs. Brown outs for 4 weeks #1 over Help. You know, I don't think the Beatles or Rolling Stones could quite cope with it, but, you know, at least John Lennon and Paul always looked after Peter and Herman. When he was very young, to go to America, I had to go to Bow Street Magistrates Court in loco parentis instead of the parent to be with him. And he told me he used to go around the clubs, and John and Paul used to switch vodka tonics for lemonade when he was 15 or 16. So,
he was that young.
Yeah, that was before, but he was a star. He'd been on Coronation Street initially when he was about 13, and he was kind of, you know, he had a great face, beautifully dressed. He was the Man of the Year award for dress in, I think, 1967, best dressed man in England. So, you know, he had a lot going for him.
Wow. I loved reminiscing about the songs I'm Not in Love, The Things We Do for Love.
Right. Which one do you want to talk about? Right.
Both the band and
okay. Well,
your time with NCC, I'm just geeking out over this next topic. So.
Well, the people often ask me, what was it like when did you know that I'm into something? No, sorry, I'm Not in Love was a hit, and I said yes after about 15 seconds because we heard it unmixed in the studio.
Okay.
So we just sat there, and this wall of voices was coming around us, and this constant beat, and it was hypnotic. And whereas it was in the category of For Your Love, but even more so, it just had the atmosphere. You knew this was going to be a monumental song. Worried a bit about the length because it was pretty long, but that was that. And then when it came out, we had all the pantomime of whether you can have a long single. Of course, there was MacArthur Park before it. No, there was always a problem. The record companies always, and the radio stations always found a way of screwing it up for us. They didn't play Rubber Bullets because of one of the lyrics, and that made it #1. Oh. It was banned from the BBC to start with, and that, of course, made it immediate hit, #1. I mean, that was the end of that. So they had to play it. You know, I mean, my attitude is that all these people they're employed. Record companies at the time were employed. And they had maybe 500 acts, but as long as you've got the Beatles, you're okay. You know, we've got our jobs for the year. They're all marked. Don't worry about it. You don't need any talent.
very like a very eclectic band. I mean, you know, they pop hits, yes.
Yeah.
But very experimental, very eclectic. How do you balance that? Did you want to balance that? Did you just let them do what they wanted? And how do you take a band like that and...
No, I don't accept responsibility for that. I had all the hits with all the initial hits with Herman's Hermits, and then Tony Christie, who I managed, and all the stories attached to that. And we had lots of hits, and I wanted to get a band that wrote its own music. Okay. I already managed Kevin Law from day one, 1964. I was representing Kevin Law. They wrote beautiful songs and did lots of avant-garde things. They were art students. They were very, very, very artistic, very talented. But of course, as far as songs are concerned, nothing happened. Eric Stewart was a brilliant, good-looking guitarist with Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders, and split, became the Mindbenders. Groovy Kind of Love, worldwide #1. He joined them with Graham to be the Mindbenders. They put a track called Schoolgirl out, which was quite good. It didn't happen. And then they bought the studio, Strawberry Studio. From the studio, there was a lot of downtime. They acted, the four of them acted as session musicians, whatever was going in there. So if somebody wanted a girl singer, they would go and do the backing, or they'd do records on their own, put them out under false names, and everything failed. Of course, everything always does fail. And then we had the breaks. We had an act called Ramesses, which was a couple. The guy thought he was in the reincarnation of Ramesses III, an Egyptian god. Came into my flat in London while I was having a weekend away with my girlfriend, future wife, and appeared at the door in togas and said, "Somebody in New York has told me that you'll be very good for us. Can you listen to this?" And I got a deal for them with the record company that weekend. And then the members of 10cc all did the music. So it's called Space Hymns. It was a really good album. And then the thing happened with Sedaka, because I knew Donny Kirshner. Lots of stories with him where I have memories of going to his house and he brought Neil Diamond down from the upstairs. He said, he's got this song to play. Neil Diamond was unknown. He said, I've got this song, would you like to tell me what you think with your ears? He had some respect for me. So anyhow, it was I'm a Believer. And he just played it on the guitar. And we've got another writer upstairs, Carol Bayer-Sager. She comes in and does a song. So I was very friendly with Donny Kirshner. When I got to New York, I was a big fan of Neil Sedaka in my teens. That was pre-everything, pre-accountancy even. So I was at college or school or whatever. I said, what happened to Neil Sedaka? I said, oh, he's upstairs. And I'm with my wife and I looked at her. I said, oh. And he said, do you want to see him? I said, yeah, that'd be great. We got up to this little room, which is 10 feet by 6 feet with an upright panel. And there's Neil there. And Donny said, play some songs for Harvey. See, and I'm looking for a song for Tony Christie because he's like a Tom Jones. I said, I want a song for a Tom Jones-like singer. I told Donny exactly what I wanted. They played 4 songs, which were very mediocre, and then they played Amarillo. I said, that's it. I want that. Will you send it to me? Please send the demo. Nothing happened. I went back to England, and it was just, Carol kept saying, phone up Donny, get that song. Well, it finally came after 3 months. I went to London, we recorded the next day, and it got to 18 in the charts, and 30 years later, it was #1, biggest record of the year in England in 2004. Sedaka now realized, oh, well, this guy's got something. Let's go and do 3 tracks at Strawberry. Came and did 2 albums, after which all your American hits came. Love Will Keep Us Together and all those things, Solitaire, all those were out of that album. And he said to the boys, well, why don't you form your own band? You've done it with me, why don't you do it? So in a way, it sort of evolved into 10cc from there. In the meantime, there was a track called The Anfield Man, which was the 3 of them did. That was really when we were experimenting with sound in the studio. But after Sedaka, that really took its shape, and that's how 10cc started.
If I'm not mistaken, The Anthropol Man was, you started your mission was experimenting with sound. It wasn't necessarily, not that it wasn't meant to be a song, but can you talk a bit about that, because that's a fascinating.
Yes, I can. It's just I got hold of this song. They played me this demo when they'd finished it. They were messing around the studio. They were trying to test sounds out. And I said, that's a hit. That's unbelievable. What's that? You know, and I don't even know where the voices were on at that stage. But anyhow, I said, that's very unusual. And nobody believed it was going to be a hit. But Dick Leahy came up to the studio and they played him. And he said, well, I'll give you 500 quid for that, or something like that. And they all went ahead with it. It was a #1. And the DJ, what's his name? One of the DJs, a very big DJ in England, said, you can put it on my graveyard if it goes to #1.
Wow.
Oh, it's a hit, yeah. It was Kenny Everett, that's right. So he had kind of egg on his face. That was that. And then going to Things We Do for Love, that was after the group had split and all the hassles and the thing. And the first thing they did was the Things We Do for Love, which there was some very weird stories about that, which I'd rather not tell, because it's not. All I'm trying to say is I don't think Kevin was very impressed with it, put it that way. And it actually sold as many as I'm Not in Love in America. It did very well there. Bette Midler was very keen on it. She loved it.
Wow. I remember one of my keyboards, one of my synths was not when I say early sampler, not Fairlight early sampler, but on Sonic that a kid in Whitby could buy, as a musician and whatever, have 17, 18 years old or whatever. But I bought the Onsonic and it came with the floppy disks, and one of the floppies was the airiness of Not in Love, and it was just like you just press it and away it goes. And I thought that was fascinating to hear again, just getting this technology. We did so much more with it, obviously, but just to be able to sort of play that sample, not necessarily use it in any song, but it was just, I don't know, it was just amazing. I don't know, would that have been licensed to on Sonic for that? Because it was distributed with the board at the time, I remember.
It could well have been, and I can't answer the question because I don't know.
No. Anyway, sorry. I just going on.
No,
I got goosebumps going down memory lane here. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
So were you involved when Godley and Cream, or I always thought it was Creme, but I guess Godley and Cream. As a kid, I always just thought that. Sorry, I digress. Were you involved? Like, I mean, we talked about earlier about the video for Tina Turner. I mean, the two of them did like Duran Duran. Yes, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, The Police. Were you involved with them at that point when they were making the videos?
I was involved with them, not in the videos. No, I was looking after Graham and Eric in 10cc. But when they left, it was very amicable because they said, well, we wanted to go into video production and we want to go with this guy called John Gaden, who had a video company, was involved in it. And I said, fine, but I want to retain the publishing of your material. So I retained the publishing and the relationship to this day as well. And we had lots of hits. And no, they then went out to America and they did all the videos. And the most amazing video for me was the Cry video, which again, I published Cry, but they did the video, which Michael Jackson ripped off with the morphing and everything. And it's a shame, really, they didn't really get as much credit as they should have done for that video. I mean, it was a good video, but it was an astonishing video, for pioneering video.
Time.
Yeah, I think it did, like, I don't know, obviously not total sales.
It got recognized, yes.
Yeah, and in Canada, when we talk about Much Music, I mean, it was a big staple of Much Music then, and like it was, I don't know, I was blown away by it. I want to be respectful of your time, and so I just want to ask you one last question, or if not question, but if you could share one story, and that is the story of meeting Elvis.
Right. We've done a massive tour of America and finished off in Hawaii, where I was very friendly with a DJ called Tom Moffat on K-Poi in Honolulu. And we got to the hotel and there was a telegram saying the Colonel and Elvis would like to meet you at the Polynesian Village. We're shooting a film. Would you like to come over? And I could never understand when I see the photographs of that day why it was just myself, Peter Noon and Barry Whitram, and two other members of the band, or three, weren't there. And I only, as a result of this book, I spoke to one of the boys and they said, well, we got different messages to say that they're changing the time and they're changing the day. And we got fed up. We were tired. We went home because we'd had enough of this tour. So it was just the three of us. We went to the village. And then the Colonel meets me and he says, oh, a fat Brian Epstein. I thought, wonderful, that's a great start. We went into the hut and Elvis Presley got no shoes on, or maybe had flip-flops, white trousers, bare midriff up, blue cream hair, and 6 henchmen all dressed the same. If he smiled, they smiled. This was the king. And everything he did, they had mimicked. So the Colonel, when they went in the car, there was a procession behind us, 4 Cadillacs with the king in the middle. It was all this, and it was just a phenomenal time. It's just, I could just remember it as though it was yesterday, and that's the sort of thing you do remember very distinctly. And Presley was very nice, very clean cut, very friendly and sweet in a way. I don't know if he knew who we were, but I didn't question that. Got back to England and all the people were trying to get TVs on us. You've seen Elvis? Because Elvis was like never seen by anybody in England in person. It was a big deal.
That's amazing. Harvey, thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast. Thank you so much for writing the book. Amazing.
I must interrupt there. Charlie Thomas was the biographer. I got to give him a credit. He did a really nice job on it.
Okay.
He wrote it, and I just gave the stories. He actually wrote it down. you know, everybody's saying I wrote it. Yeah, well, and give him some credit as well.
And the book is called I'm Into Something Good.
Yeah.
My Life Managing 10cc, Herman's Hermits, and many more. I love books like these, and thank you so much, Harvey.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
For the memories and for this conversation. Yeah,
it was great. I enjoyed talking to both of you, and the picture of the album that you switched around.
We'll put this one back up.
You're gonna put Tina Turner back.
Turn it back up.
Oh, don't poke the bear, Kareem. Don't poke the bear.
No.
You know, reminds me of Rod Stewart, Hot Legs, you know. Yeah.
I was actually looking. I thought I had the Joseph album. And the only reason, and we'll end it off here, the only reason I would have had that album was back in high school. My sister was in a school choir. And Joseph came to Toronto. Donny Osmond played Joseph.
Right.
And the choir in her school was one of the choirs that sang. I think might have been 2 or 3 that sang on stage for his run in Toronto, which was, I think, back in the day. I think that was the first time Joseph came to Toronto. And the story goes, we actually had a family reunion. So family from England, from all across Canada. We had come that summer. We wait backstage. We all go to the show. We're waiting backstage. My sister comes out. We're waiting for Donny Osmond. Bunch of people waiting for Donny to get autographs. My dad gives Donny the camera. Says, "Can you take a picture of us?" So that's my memory of Joseph and the amazing.
I got Joseph on the album, and Tim Rice was Potiphar on the album.
Wow.
That we got originally.
Wow. Thanks so much for the stories, Harvey.
Okay, it's very nice talking to you. Cheers.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.